some yummy, yummy skirt steak tacos and talking about why DEI, that is to say diversity, equity, and inclusion, if I have the acronym correct, is going to destroy our infrastructure, is going to make it very difficult to use an already difficult airport system, is going to make it challenging to use our roads, challenging to cross bridges, go under tunnels, everything that we don't expect living in what used to be a first world country. Pass the camera off to my far right Latina girlfriend. Well, we can get started. Okay, so before we get going on today's lesson, got our skirt steak, which we have conveniently already seasoned. It's already been salted with garlic powder and onion powder on both sides. So all we have to do is fry it up and chop it up, which we're going to do shortly. Then our cooking powder is going to be ghee. And then we got tortillas, Siete brand almond flour for my girlfriend, and the raw ones from H-E-B, no seed oils in either one for myself. So we're gonna get the cast iron going as well as the tortilla skillet. And I'm gonna let you know why DEI is causing a lot of challenges and will continue to cause challenges for our infrastructure. And so everybody who's watching this video probably has an understanding that DEI does not lead to the most qualified people running companies and the most qualified people handling responsibilities, as can be the case with airline companies or public infrastructure projects, or even nuclear power plants. As I've often heard people say, nuclear power is safe, nuclear power is so safe. But the reality is it's not safe if it's run by incompetent people. Nothing's safe if it's run by incompetent people. And so, one of the things that you may notice is after there's a bank failure, after there is a security breach, after there is a infrastructure failure of any kind, there's often a review of what went right and what went wrong. And the review almost never comes up with incompetence, like institutionalized incompetence is never the answer for why a problem occurred. So we can think about something as simple as the Jeffrey Epstein murder-suicide okay, why was this not on film? Why were the guards who were supposed to make sure that nobody could kill this guy not, I think, supposedly sleeping at the time? And so, it's anytime there's a cover-up, it's always put on the individual. Oh, these individuals did this, these individuals did that. It's never like, no, the entire organization is completely incapable of being trusted with any degree of responsibility. And that would be the case if merit is thrown out the window, as is the case with DEI. You cannot have DEI in a merit-based company, otherwise you would not need a DEI program, right? If the company sought employees that were capable of doing work, they may have, actually, I'll take a somewhat controversial statement relative to my audience, they may have a program seeking diversity and inclusion, probably not equity, but it wouldn't be towards the groups that you would expect. There's no reason why you would segment your audience by race and sex. If you're looking to hire qualified people who may be overlooked for the qualifications or the skills or the attributes that they may bring to the workforce, you would actually look for tangential professions to hire from that get overlooked by your competitors. So like, I was a professional baseball player. A lot of professional baseball players are capable of handling stressful jobs with high production quotas because that's what it is to be a professional baseball player. A lot of times it's difficult for these people to enter the workforce because their resume doesn't look like the resumes that recruiters traditionally screen for, and recruiters aren't trained to process what's essentially, a tenth of 1% of the resumes that they're going to see. rather than look at a potential pro athlete's resume or a former pro athlete's resume and say, oh, this person can be a great employee, they're not going to be able to recognize it. They're going to toss it on the reject pile and go after the resumes that they're more comfortable with. Okay, this is, take a break from that. When the oil put that there, wash my hands. So it would make sense for companies, and a lot of companies have programs designed to hire veterans because there's a lot more veterans than there are pro athletes. And veterans have handled responsibility under high pressure. They're capable of following instructions without thinking too hard about it.
And they get federal money.
And they get federal money. I forgot about that. But they're also capable of like following instructions without too much critical thinking, which is exactly what most companies want their employees to do. And so they have programs to integrate veterans into the workforce. They don't have programs to integrate pro athletes into the workforce. A lot of times, companies don't have programs to integrate people who've been successful in other domains into their domain. This is what business schools have frequently done. So a lot of times you'll see business schools enlist people or admit people who've been successful in one career, but don't have experience in another career. They want to switch from being an NFL player to working in finance or something like that. Okay, so that's what business school is for. But companies can do this. Companies don't need to outsource this training to business school. Companies could, in fact, insource this themselves. It's not actually that hard to train an individual to do a job that companies hire for. They just don't have scale effects. So, maybe you're going to get 15x pro athletes. It just doesn't make sense for an entire program to be created around them, so they don't typically exist. All right, bubbles coming up. That means we're going to flip the tortillas. And so what you have to realize is the reason why the narrative on DEI has been so one-sided and nobody's asking critical questions is you just have to see where the money flows. There are so many companies or NGOs that are dealing with lots of donations or grants or contracts that are in the business of selling the snake oil that is DEI. So you can make a lot of money selling the bullshit story that DEI is. You can't make that much money speaking about the negative aspects of DEI, right? So even if these McKinsey studies about DEI have been largely fraudulent in their miscategorization of the data or their concealing of what the true data likely says, they're still making money selling their consulting to executives who haven't quite figured out the scam, or who might think that it could look good from a PR standpoint to have a bunch of dark people on their company website, that's been a game that's been going on for quite some time in the university sector. They're hiring, even if they are token minorities, even if the game that they're playing is obvious to other people, they still play the game because someone's making money off of them playing the game. It's just been this predominantly white society that the West is, the United States is, has become ashamed of the fact that that's that, and it's become more exotic or interesting or whatever to have people with darker skin tones and female genitalia be positioned on the front lines for companies. I don't know. Apparently people think that that's forward thinking. Okay, that's the perfect color. So what are we trying to do here?
How did you know it was ready?
What's that?
How did you know it's ready to flip?
A lot of times when there is moisture coming up, you see a little bit of moisture coming up, you got a good sense that that meat is ready to flip. So we probably spent 3 minutes cooking one side. We're only going to spend about 1.5 minutes cooking the other side. Spin these real quick. Grab some cheese.
Tortillas are ready to
Okay,
flip.
we're gonna flip these tortillas because they're bubbled up. If you got any questions, drop them, por favor. That's me being inclusive. All right. So, we're gonna leave the center down. So, one thing I do at the end is the end pieces are gonna cook before the middle and the thinner pieces are gonna cook before the thick. So I'm suspending the end piece from the pan because that's already been cooked. I'm gonna let that middle piece cook for about 30 more seconds. I'm gonna take that tortilla off. Take that off. All right, we're gonna turn this off right now. And then we're gonna let this sit for a couple minutes. Realistically, 3-4 minutes should be sufficient while we get everything else put away. Okay, so there's never accurate postmortems for why companies that love diversity and inclusion fail. They will never say, well, the reason why we failed is because of our diversity and inclusion program. In fact, it's a banned narrative. You can't even talk about stuff like this on Reddit. You can't even ask questions on Reddit. Or is this reasonable? Is this a reasonable thing for Boeing to be doing? Literally, like anybody with a brain would be wondering, to what extent does a program that didn't always exist contribute to an outcome that also didn't always exist? And both the program and the outcome never existed in the company until the last 10 years, right? Like a very reasonable person would be wondering, okay, so to what extent did this program result in this outcome? And you know this from the COVID propaganda, that anytime you aren't allowed to ask questions, those are very likely the questions that you should be asking. Because the reality is, without a full investigation, nobody knows. And so when you see all these journalists saying, well, of course the DEI program didn't lead to the fall of Silicon Valley Bank. Obviously the DEI program, it's like, no, it's not obvious. You don't know without an investigation. You cannot know without an investigation. So do I know that the DEI program at Boeing led to problems with their 737 MAX? I don't know that. But I also know that you don't know the opposite. You don't know that it didn't either. And so if you come out and affirmatively say that you know that it didn't cause damage, then I know you're lying, right? And so listen for the media to continue to make these stories up as they consistently do, trying to disparage any contradictory viewpoint of DEI. Like, listen, if I'm China and I have the ability, and I realize that a lot of the West's knowledge and advantage over me is in their institutions. If I can get their institutions to be led by their worst or least qualified people, if I can get the Bulls to put Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan on the bench because they think that it's cool, that's my best strategy for beating the Bulls. I don't have a better strategy for beating the 90s Bulls than figuring out a way to have them be embarrassed for putting Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen in the same game together, right? Imagine if the Utah Jazz from Utah, predominantly white state, were able to convince the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s that it's not very friendly to have a disproportionate number of African Americans on the court at the same time. African Americans only constitute 12% of the population. So at most, if there's 5 people on the court, you should have at most 1 African American on the court at once, right? Well, that would mean the Bulls wouldn't be able to have Jordan and Pippen on the court at the same time, right? So you could play defense. You could try to play defense against Jordan and Pippen, or you could just shame the Bulls into not putting them on the court at the same time. Realistically, if they were successful in doing that, good for them. But obviously, you know, nobody would be dumb enough to do that, not even Mark Cuban. So this is a little bit darker, and it's not because I overcooked it. It's actually because the meat was exposed to some degree of oxidization. So you can see right now, center cuts, very juicy.
Keep talking.
And as we can see, this is looking pretty nice. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Okay, let's see how we did. Skirt steak, in case you didn't know, is cheaper than ribeye. It's cheaper than New York strip. It has more protein than both, I believe. Tastes amazing if you cook it right, so let's see. Chef Alex didn't miss. That's phenomenal. I encourage you to cook some skirt steak once you get your hands on it. Thank you very much for tuning in to Wednesday's live stream lunch. See you in a couple days, 2 Eastern, every Wednesday, every Friday, except for traveling. Bring your questions, bring your hunger. Peace out.